All right, guys, I am going to read to you the Unit 6. Okay, so the first passage here for us to read, this is from the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Question 1. Read the sentence to the Declaration of Independence. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So, what does the word despotism refer to in this sentence? Is it a tyrannical government, a distant government, a controlling government, or an inept government? Let's try another one. Question 2. And again, if I'm going fast, you can just pause and then go back to the question. Question 2. How does paragraph 2 expand on how despotism has led to the current tension between the colonies and Great Britain? Does it question the legality of Great Britain's rule over the colonies? Does it provide a list of specific grievances against the king? Does it explain the philosophy that supports separation from Great Britain? Or does it highlight how a government led by a monarch is different from a democracy? Question 3. How does paragraph 2 and its 3 key points relate to the introduction of the passage? Does they relate to the history of similar rebellions against unfair European governments? Does it give factual examples of ways in which England mistreated the American colonies? Does it set forth the principles that justify the American colonies' revolt against England? Or does it describe the reforms that the American colonists tried to persuade England to institute? Okay, the next set of questions are from the Benjamin Banneker piece. Benjamin Banneker's letter to Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Banneker was a free man descended from African slaves. In his letter to Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, Banneker condemned slavery and attempted to persuade Jefferson to end the practice of slavery in the United States. Sir, I freely and cheerfully acknowledge that I am of the African race, and in that color which is natural to them of the deepest dye, and it is under a sense of the most profound gratitude to the supreme ruler of the universe that I now confess to you that I am not under that state of tyrannical thraldom and inhuman captivity, to which too many of my brethren are doomed, but that I have abundantly tasted of the fruition of those blessings which proceed from that free and unequaled liberty with which you are favored, and which I hope you will willingly allow you have received from the immediate hand of that being, from whom proceedeth every good and perfect gift. This, sir, was a time in which you clearly saw into the injustice of a state of slavery, and in which you had just apprehensions of the horrors of its condition. It was now, sir, that your abhorrence thereof was so excited, that you publicly held forth this true and invaluable doctrine, which is worthy to be recorded and remembered in all succeeding ages. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Here, sir, was a time in which your tender feelings for yourselves had engaged you thus to declare. You were then impressed with proper ideas of the great valuation of liberty, and the free possession of those blessings to which you were entitled by nature. But, sir, how pitiable is it to reflect, that although you were so fully convinced of the benevolence of the Father of mankind, and of his equal and impartial distribution of those rights and privileges which he had conferred upon them, that you should at the same time counteract his mercies in detaining by fraud and violence so numerous a part of my brethren under groaning captivity and cruel oppression, that you should at the same time be found guilty of that most criminal act, which you professedly detested in others with respect to yourselves. Sir, I suppose that your knowledge of the situations of my brethren is too extensive to need a recital here. Neither shall I presume to prescribe methods by which they may be relieved, otherwise than by recommending to you and all others to wean yourselves from these narrow prejudices which you have imbibed with respect to them, and as Job proposed to his friends, put your souls in their souls' stead. Thus shall your heart be enlarged with kindness and benevolence toward them, and thus shall you need neither the direction of myself or others in what manner to proceed herein. And now, sir, I shall conclude and subscribe myself with the most profound respect, your most obedient, humble servant, Benjamin Banneker. Question number 4. Throughout his letter, how does Banneker try to convince Jefferson that slavery is wrong? He provides evidence of how badly enslaved people are treated. He provides evidence of how well he has done as a free black man. He appeals to Jefferson as an equal, or he appeals to Jefferson's sense of justice. Question number 5. What is the central claim of Benjamin Banneker's letter to Thomas Jefferson? It is hypocritical to state that all men are created equal in a country that permits slavery. The only way to end slavery is with criminal acts and violent rebellion. Former slaves should be allowed a more prominent role in government. It is logical and fair to grant unalienable rights to individuals who have escaped from slavery. Question number 6. Which statement most accurately describes the theme developed in this sentence? A nation cannot call itself free and equal until all of its citizens are free and equal. Some are deserving of freedom and others are not. Equality is a blessing that is earned, not inherited. Discrimination and injustice cannot exist where the rights of the individual come first. Here's another passage. We've already read this one in our unit. This is from Washington's farewell address. To the efficacy and permanency of your Union, a government for the whole is indispensable. No alliances, however strict, between the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions and interruptions which all alliances in all times have experienced. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of your own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles, in the distribution of its powers, uniting security of energy, and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures, are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government. But the Constitution, which at any time exists until changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people, is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. Question number 7. Which quotation from this passage best expresses the concept that every citizen's well-being depends on a unified government and protecting it is of the highest importance? Is it the name of American which belongs to you in the national capacity must always exalt the just pride of patriotism, more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. You have a common cause fought and triumphed together. The unity of government which constitutes you to one people is also now dear to you. And the last one says, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. All right, here's another passage to read. It's from The Siege of Boston by Alan French. This is about the Boston Massacre, which took place on March 5th, 1770, when British soldiers fired into a crowd of colonists who had been protesting the occupation of the city by British troops. For 3 days there was, among the 2 regiments stationed in the town, anger which the inhabitants endeavored to allay by the discharge of the rope-maker, who gave the original insult, and by agreements made with the commanding officer, Colonel Dalrymple. But as afterwards appeared, there were warnings of former trouble. Cautions were given to friends of the soldiers not to go on the streets at night. The soldiers and their women could not refrain from dark hints of violence to come. It is even possible that violence was concerted. On the night of the 5th, a number of soldiers assembled in Atkinson Street. They stood very still until the guns were fired in the King Street. Then they clapped their hands and gave a cheer, saying, "This is all that we want." They then ran to their barracks and came out again in a few minutes, all with their arms, and ran toward King Street. I never, so runs other testimony, saw men or dogs so greedy for their prey as these soldiers seemed to be. But the affray was of small proportions and soon over. The actual outbreak originated in a quarrel between a barber's boy and a sentry, stationed in King Street below the east end of the town-house. Boys and men gathered, the sentry called out the guard, fire bells were rung, and the crowd increased. The captains of the guard were not the man for the emergency. Said Henry Knox, afterward General and Secretary of War, I took Captain Preston by the coat and told him for God's sake to take his men back again, for if they fired his life must answer for the consequence. He replied he was sensible of it, or knew that what he was about, or words to that purpose, and seemed in great haste and much agitated. The gathering still increased, there was crowding and jostling, snowballs and possibly sticks were thrown, the soldiers grew angry, and the officers uncertain what to do. The soldiers, testified John Hickling, assumed different postures, shoving their bayonets frequently at the people. One in particular, pushing against my side, swore he would run me through. I laid hold of his bayonet and told him that nobody was going to meddle with them. Not more than 10 seconds after this, I saw something white, resembling a piece of snow or ice, fall among the soldiers, which knocked the end of a firelock to the ground. At that instant the word "fire" was given, but by whom I know not, but concluded it did not come from the officer aforesaid, as I was within a yard of him, and must have heard him had he spoken it. But am satisfied, said Preston, did not forbid them to fire. I instantly leaped within the soldier's bayonet, as I heard him cock his gun, which that moment went off. I was thinking there was nothing but powder fired, stood still till I saw another gun fired, and the man, since called Attucks, fall. I then withdrew about 2 or 3 yards. During this, the rest of the guns were fired, one after another, when I saw 2 more fall. I further declare that I heard no other affront given than the huzzaing and whistling of boys in the street. After the firing, the other soldiers were summoned to the spot, and more townspeople appeared. The soldiers say the official narrative were drawn up between the State House and Main Guard. Their lines extended across the street and facing down King Street, where the town people were assembled. The first line kneeled, and the whole of the first platoon presented their guns ready to fire, as soon as the word should be given. For some time the appearance of things were dismal. The soldiers outrageous on one hand, and the inhabitants justly incensed against them on the other. Both parties seemed disposed to come to action. Had the affair gone further, so that the soldiers fired again, or the townspeople stormed the barracks, then the affray would have resembled the riots not uncommon in Europe at that time, and known even in England. In such a case the turbulence of Boston might have been proved. But the good town was later able to claim that up to the actual breaking out of hostilities, not one soldier or Tory had been harmed in Massachusetts. In the present case nothing further happened. The stubborn people stood their ground, but the eager troops were restrained and led away. The punishment of the offenders took place according to law, with John Adams and Josiah Quincy, Jr., leader of the Whigs, as successful defenders of the captain. Here's the picture of the Boston Massacre that goes with that.